Good morning, everyone. My name is David Yackel. I'm a member of this church. And right now, you can get out your phone. You can check in that you're at the service today, and then you can turn it off. All right, so that we can make sure that we don't interrupt anything. One thing we want to make sure that we point out to everyone is the exits in the room. They are, of course, behind you, but there is also exits out here, so I get to play flight attendant along with this. We want to welcome everybody that is watching on live stream at home as well. And then one of the joys that we get to do every day is to recognize our visitors. Is there a member that has brought a visitor today or met somebody this morning that you'd like to stand up and introduce?
I'd like to introduce my friend who is visiting us from Chicago.
Welcome. Thank you. Are there any? Oh, sorry. Thank you. Wonderful. Welcome. Is there anybody else that is outgoing enough and brave enough to stand up and introduce themselves? If not, please know that if you are a visitor today, we do have a Sunday plus lunch after the service down in Conover. Just let the cashier know that you are a visitor and your meal is on us today. Thank you.
Good morning and welcome. I hope you enjoyed your extra hour of sleep last night. Welcome to this community of paradox, where we acknowledge the worst of what we do to each other as humans, and still affirm the people we want to be and the world we hope to build together. So yes, again, even as we gathered to embrace and support our Jewish friends, yet another act of identity-based violence unfolded, this time in Florida. This time, not because they were Black or Jewish, but because they were women. Once again, the rage of entitlement and privilege snuffs out the lives of ordinary, innocent people. Once again, we are sad, angry, disgusted, bewildered, but not surprised. We're not shocked anymore. We know how this goes. The activist and ecologist Joanna Macy writes, "When we face the darkness of our time openly and together, we tap into deep reserves of strength within us. Many of us fear that confrontation with despair will bring loneliness and isolation. But on the contrary, in the letting go of old defenses, truer community is found. Thus do we realize ever again that the simple eloquence of telling the truth liberates us to find insight, solidarity, and courage to act despite rapidly worsening conditions. In the synergy of sharing comes power. In community, we learn to trust our own inner responses to our world and to find our power. This is why we are here together for this hour, set apart from both the business and the pleasures of our days, to confront our despair, to face the darkness of our times openly and together, to tell the truth and find our courage, to remember our aspirations, to gather our power for the lives we choose to lead together. May the flame we kindle in the chalice of this hour burn in our hearts, minds, and spirits at all times. In its light, may we choose lives of justice and peace, honesty and kindness, courage and wholeness, and love.
Good morning. My name is Sierra, and I light this chalice for a free and responsible search for truth and meaning.
Thank you. Now let us rise in body or spirit as we are able and speak once again the words of our community's covenant. Together we affirm, goodwill is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, that dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Now, if you'll remain standing, we're going to do our opening hymn, and we're going to try something a little fancy today, which is that in between each of the verses we sing, Shanna's going to sing another little piece. So it's going to be kind of a dialogue back and forth, so watch your screen.
Below, across the sea plains blue, but longer far my heart must go before its dreams come true. The lone wild bird in lofty flight is still with thee, nor leaves thy sight, and I am thine, I rest in thee. Great Spirit, come and rest in me, and work we must, and do the best we may, and take the hope of dreams in trust to keep us day by day. The ends of earth are in thy hand, the seas dark, deep, and far off land, and I am thine, I rest in thee. Great Spirit, come and rest in me. A long, long way the sea winds below, but somewhere lies our shore. Thus down the tide of time shall flow my dreams forevermore.
Thank you. Our commitment to human fellowship means that we are called upon to be glad with those who rejoice and to weep with those who mourn. We set aside this time in our gathering to share with one another the joys and concerns that are now shaping our lives. May the beauty and sweetness of these brief flowers remind us to hold one another in the bonds of sympathy encouragement, and care. We come to this moment today in sad awareness of the lives lost to public hatred and terror just in the past few days. I begin with a flower of remembrance for those who died. A week ago Wednesday in Jeffersontown, Kentucky, Maurice Stallard and Vicki Lee Jones. A week ago Saturday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Daniel Stein, Melvin Wax, Irving Younger, Joyce Feinberg, Richard Gottfried, Rose Mallinger, Jerry Rabinowitz, brothers Cecil Rosenthal and David Rosenthal, married couple Bernice Simon and Sylvan Simon. And the day before yesterday in Tallahassee, Florida, Nancy Van Vessem and Maura Binkley. Are there other joys or concerns to be shared this morning?
Hi, I'm Ruth. My cousins, my family is a fairly complicated group of people. Whose family is not complicated? But they are trying to get the second cousins, my generation is trying to get a reunion going. And I was fortunate enough to be able to take my mother, my 89-year-old mother, to a meeting in Topeka yesterday. And she stayed for the entire time. It was from 9 until noon. And got to share stories. And they wanted the elders. So in her generation, there are 6 left. One has dementia so bad that she can't leave the home. And the other 5 were there, and they shared their stories, and we had a lovely lunch and time together. And I was so happy to be able to bring Mom.
That's great.
Friday, I had an opportunity to visit Schwab Major, who is 92, and he's a veteran, and he's bedfast at this point. His wife, Wilma, was concerned about that they hadn't taken care of his absentee voting, and he assured her that he had received it, he had completed it, and it was in the mail. So,
yay, Schwab! A good example for us all. And we should note Schwab is in hospice care, and he's at home with his family.
Hi, I'm Marley. I just wanted to say that I don't think I have ever been so proud or so grateful to be part of All Souls than I was Friday night. Kendyl has described it very well. What she didn't say was every seat here was filled. We had to open these doors. Dave Roberts brought the folding chairs, this whole huge cart of them, and I thought, what are we going to do with all these chairs? He used every one of them clear back almost to the windows of so many of us, of the Jewish community, and so many people we didn't know, all standing together. And it was wonderful. I was very fortunate to be part of it.
It was inspiring. Thanks, Marley. Other joys or concerns? I want to place a flower for Ben Chelsis, one of our old friends who is out in Greenwood, but also failing. And so if he's a friend of yours, give him a call. And then one for Carolyn Connor, who's home after open heart surgery and seems to be in good spirits and doing well. Yeah.
My dad had to find a job and he went out, and I really miss him.
Oh, okay. Tell us your name. Okay.
Lula.
Okay. Thank you, Lula. You want to put a flower? There you go. Thank you.
It may not seem in all these earth-shaking things consequential, but as far as our 2006 Prius, historic first-generation Prius, something had happened, and it must be the big battery, and we could. The only thing that worked was you could open and close the front door. Everything else was frozen. And so I had it towed out to Ole, thinking that we were going to have to give it up and buy a good used Prius. And all it was a regular battery. They charged it up and everything worked.
It is nice when that works out, isn't it? Long live Priuses. I have one myself.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Cynthia, and I'm sharing a concern. My children are very fortunate to have a close group of friends. And one of the friends that they have grown up with is dealing with anorexia and cutting. And she asked for help and finally was admitted into children. She came home last night. We got to visit with her. She is much happier than I have seen her in a long time because she is finally getting the mental health care that she desperately needed and wanted. And so I would ask that all of us keep our friend in your thoughts and that you keep all young people in your thoughts because so many of these kids are going through so much pressure today. So please keep them in your hearts.
And the more we talk about it, the less shame there is, which I think is so helpful. So thank you for sharing.
I have a joy this morning that I am 6 weeks post bunion surgery. I am carefully dual foot driving.
Wow.
I will be working the polls as a Democratic observer on Tuesday in Platte County.
Yay.
I'm taking my own chair because I don't want to stand up all day. And I will be visiting my daughter in Austin, Texas next weekend.
Oh, that'll be fun. Yeah, good. Well, safe travels and thank you for doing that with the poll watching. Other joys or concerns? If not, I will place one final flower for all the outreachings of the Spirit that abide unspoken in our hearts, and invite you to join me in the congregational response on the screen. From the words of Wendell Berry, when despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water and feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free. And now we will excuse our children to go attend their classes with song.
Good morning. My name is Diane Cassidy, and today it is my honor to introduce Brandon Mixon, and he also brought his son Ashton with the Veterans Community Project. He's going to tell you a little bit about that project, but one thing I want to say that it is important that we tell veterans that we thank them for their service, but this is a way to, this program gives back to those veterans in need. So thank you, Brandon.
Thank you, and good morning. Again, my name is Brandon Mixon. I'm one of the co-founders of Veterans Community Project. How many of you guys have heard of Veterans Community Project? All right, we do a great job branding then. So for those of you that don't know, we're actually a local nonprofit right here in Kansas City. We started right here in Kansas City. There's 4 of us co-founders. We're all combat vets, Iraq or Afghanistan. We were literally seeing our brothers and sisters failing on the streets, right? We had a background in nonprofits before us. We felt that nonprofits and the world wasn't doing enough for our brothers and sisters, right? So statistically speaking, 12% of vets actually qualify for services, and the rest do not. So a lot of people automatically assume that veterans qualify for services, so mental health care, dental care, veterinary services, etc. That's not the case at all. Roughly about 12% do. So with that being said, we went out and we're like, you know what, we can do better for, humankind, for our brothers and sisters. And what we did is we created Veterans Community Project. Now, a lot of people know us for building tiny houses for homeless vets, but that's actually one of the furthest parts in what we do. What we actually provide is wraparound services for any vet. We don't care if you're dishonorably discharged, honorably discharged, served a day in the military 30 years. At the end of the day, you took the oath to serve us. We're going to take the oath to serve you. We're one of the only nonprofits in the United States that actually helps any veteran. We believed, again, you're my brother, you're my sister. We're going to have your back. On top of that, we do build the tiny houses. So the tiny houses actually serve as a transitional housing, right? So what it is when you leave the military, literally you get just dropped on your face and you become homeless. A lot of us, just like myself, I struggled with depression and suicide pretty hardcore because I didn't know where to go in my life, right? I was always told what to wear, how to live my life, or what I was going to do. I really struggled. And so that's what the tiny house actually represents, is a transition piece for a lot of these vets. And we're able to provide the underlying services for a lot of these guys. Really excited to work with you guys for these next couple of weeks. You guys will all be able to tell these stories a bit because the community, just like yourselves, getting involved. You guys are the ones that are able to create these stories on a lot of our veterans. So that gives you a little insight of what we do. I challenge every single one of you guys to please come down and visit and what we're doing. We're opening 13 more houses November 8th to be able to, house our brothers and sisters. We're off 89th and Troost. And again, we're called Veterans Community Project. Really excited. Next week, I'll be able to tell you some great stories. Really excited to be here. Thanks again for everything you guys are doing. This is a community project. This is not ours, right? This is us doing this and making a difference and impact in our community. So thanks again for having us here today. Really look forward to next week telling you some veteran stories of success because of you guys. So thanks again for having me today. It's a pleasure.
In support of this project, this morning's offering will now be given and gratefully received. And I wanted to tell you about the song. Julian of Norwich was a 14th century female Christian theologian and mystic whose ecstatic visions of God led her to the assurance that all shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of thing shall be well. Meg Barnhouse is a practicing UU minister and musician who explores that claim in this song.
I said, Julian, you are holy, you are holding my hand. I said, Julian, you are holy, you are holding my hand. And she said, all will be well, all will be well, all manner of things will be well. I said, Julian, do you not know about sorrow? And Julian, do you not know about pain? I said, Julian, do you not know about hunger? And Julian, do you not know about shame? And she said, all will be well, all will be well, all manner of things will be well. I said, Julian, do you not know about loneliness? Julian, do you not know about disease? I said, Julian, do you not know about cruelty? I said, Julian, it's too much and it brings me to my knees. And she said, all will be well, all will be well, all manner of things will be well. She said, no one does not know about sorrow, and no one does not know about pain. She said, no one does not know about hunger, and no one does not know about shame. And she said, all will be well, all will be well, all manner of things will be well. She said, no one does not know about loneliness. No one does not know about disease. She said, no one does not know about cruelty. She said, and I know it's too much, and it brought me to my knees when I heard, all will be well, all will be well, all manner of things will be well. She said, baby girl, do you not know about tenderness? And baby girl, do you not know about friends? She said, baby girl, do you not know about the Spirit? She said, baby girl, do you not know only love that never ends? And she said, all will be well, all will be well, all manner of things will be well, all will be well, all will be well. She said, all will be well, all will be well.
Will you join me in our words of dedication for the offering? Together we dedicate our offerings and our actions to the mission at the heart of this congregation, to build a respectful, caring community, to inspire personal and spiritual growth, and to create change toward a just and compassionate society.
What to Tell the Children by Rachel Kahn.
Tell them that this is the Great Awakening. Tell them that we humans have made some huge mistakes, and that's how we find ourselves in this tenuous place.
Teach them that hate is the poison. Teach them that love is the remedy, that it is better to be ready for what comes next, even if the revelation is painful. Tell them that this is the paradigm shift, that the old is collapsing in on itself, that this death rattle is simply a temper tantrum, the last gasp of a dying Goliath.
Remind them of how they get wild when they are most tired and then pass out, that this is what it is about, that this is what is happening to a decrepit and ineffective empire.
Tell them that everything is not okay, and knowing that is okay. Tell them that pretending what is unacceptable is fine is what got us to this sick and dysfunctional spot on the timeline.
Tell them that they have no responsibility to follow someone blindly based solely on a title. Teach them to practice discernment. Tell them that authority and respect must be earned and are not inherently deserved.
Teach them that there are good people and bad people from every background, ethnicity, and belief system. That they must align themselves with kindness. That there is no more time for divisiveness. You tell them that just because something is legal, that doesn't mean it's right. You tell them to stand up and fight.
Remind them of all the lawful atrocities committed in the sick and twisted history of this violent country, that Rosa Parks righteously broke a law and the world took notice, that Harriet Tubman is our modern-day Moses.
That women would not be allowed to vote, and no one would have proposed another notion if the blessed rebels hadn't taken a stand.
Tell them love will win this war, but only if we remember that love is not just one unending cuddle puddle, but fierce as a mother bear protecting her cubs.
Tell them that although this existence is damaged beyond repair, they must not despair. There is possibility, and we will willingly and willfully open ourselves to new ways of being because the old way is not working, has never worked, and the world deserves better. And we're worth it.
Tell them they are not free while another suffers under enslavement. Teach them that we are all limbs on one body, and we cannot chop off our own arm without deep suffering.
Teach them humility, but also to relearn to trust their intuition and beg their forgiveness for unintentionally misleading them previously.
Tell them their gifts are useful. Tell them they are beautiful. Tell them they are the truth.
I will not insult anyone in this room by explaining why it is crucial that you vote on Tuesday, if in fact you have not already done so. If you have any doubts on the matter, I will be happy to share my thoughts in a private conversation. Ditto if you are curious about who I am voting for. This pulpit is not the place, but I'm not shy about who or why if you ask me. More than just your own vote, I do urge you to do whatever you can to help others among your friends or in your neighborhood get to the polls themselves. Encourage them to prepare for long lines and a lengthy ballot. Attempts at voter suppression must be countered by efforts at voter facilitation. We all know we have to vote. It's the only way democracy works. And democracy is one of the foundational principles of our faith. The trouble is, you know, that democracy is unpredictable. None of us can count on having our own opinions being always in the majority. Actually, democracy works a lot like God does in more conventional liberal faiths. God is always surprising. God does not make things turn out the way we want all the time. Part of God's job is to bring novelty into the world, and as often as not, that is in the form of an unpleasant turn of events. In many traditions, God is a trickster, precisely because the divine is not accountable to human expectations. Same thing with democracy. Just because we are morally or pragmatically or historically right doesn't mean we will get our way. The difference is that for the most part, we don't think of democracy as actively benevolent. It is a decision-making tool, not an infallible force. And it only has as much integrity as we who use it give to it. You can't count on democracy to come up with the right answer, just the popular one. Now, some people think that we are actually smarter in groups than we are as individuals. But it seems to me that mob psychology, or the madness of crowds, as Charles Mackay once called it, can make us both stupider and more cruel collectively than any of us would be alone. So Churchill's observation stands, I suppose. Democracy is the worst system of government except for all the others. The bottom line, it seems to me, is that blue wave or no blue wave, many of us are probably in for some disappointments Tuesday evening. Maybe a couple of the candidates we have been rooting for will bring it. Maybe a handful, but probably not all of them. Maybe your issue for the libraries or campaign reform or legal marijuana will prevail. But chances are you will have something to be more unhappy about than ever on Wednesday morning. And that unhappiness is what I want to talk about this morning. You'll be fine with the victories as long as we avoid unseemly gloating. It's the losses that challenge our integrity, our courage, and our faith. Of course, it's one thing to know that you lost an election fair and square. It's another thing altogether when we have cause to suspect that the process itself was rigged. It seems clear to me that we, the ordinary voters, ought to stop outsourcing our confidence in the electoral process to corporations and technology. Those of us who have any expertise in the matter ought to be pestering election boards about the machines that are used to cast and count ballots, and educating ourselves about what can actually go wrong with them. It is certainly tempting to return to universal paper ballots. Is that really the answer? I don't know, but someone should be teaching us. In terms of what I can do, I'm going to apply to become an election judge in Jackson County. Because if the only people who take on these kinds of civic duties to safeguard our voting process are conservatives, then the temptation to cut corners in their own favor will in time become overwhelming. As the 19th century abolitionist Wendell Phillips once reminded the nation, eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. Power is ever stealing from the many to the few. Only by continued oversight can the Democrat in office be prevented from hardening into a despot. Only by unintermitted agitation can a people be sufficiently awake to principle not to let liberty be smothered in material prosperity. Ancient words. The same consideration applies to gerrymandered districting and to the revolving door between government office and highly paid lobbyists. In short, if you don't have confidence in the mechanics of our electoral process, what piece of it are you undertaking to do something about? As citizens, we deserve and should demand a sound process for casting and counting our votes. That really is one of the minimal expectations for which government should be held accountable. Yet even so, that would not mean that we would always get our way. The candidates and causes we believe in might still really not be supported by the majority of our neighbors, for good reasons or bad. Crucial decisions may still be made with urgent consequences and not go the way you think they should. In those times, it is important to remember that history has never been a linear progress from one common good to the next, but rather a lurching from one crisis and overreaction to the next failure of nerve and collective surrender to fear. It matters in the near term tremendously. People die from the things we don't get right. There are human beings who would be alive today if it were not for the policies and the rhetoric of the current administration in Washington. Not just the high visibility victims of mass shootings, but people who died because they couldn't afford their medicine, or because they were deported back to the gangs they had fled asking for asylum, or because police officers with a history of violence were never held accountable, or because their abusive partners had easy access to guns. Policies are not abstractions. They have real-life outcomes that matter. So it is easy to despair when what seems so obviously right and necessary and humane to me does not appear that way to the person in the voting booth next to mine. That is why we need something like faith, a long perspective, the humility to acknowledge that we could be wrong after all, and the willingness to go right back to the persistent effort to build a better, more just, more humane, more workable world, even when it isn't popular. My colleague, Reverend Luke Stevens Royer, compares this process to an act of prayer. He says, I walk in as on pilgrimage. The altar cloths are red, white, and blue. The ushers are the women who have been running these things, who've been running everything since before I was born. I'm handed the ballot like a scroll because the questions seem that important, ancient and modern, of what my God and my country ask of me. Who? Who for commissioner, mayor, president? Who for District 8, Ward 7, school board? Who will do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly? I make my mark with at least a shred of hope that something good will come from this. And regardless, I remember the world won't be destroyed entirely by this. The world won't be saved entirely by this. Marking my vote is like kneeling in prayer, because neither will accomplish anything right away. But the purpose of both is to remind me of my deepest hope for the world that I'm trying to help create. So I rise from prayer and turn in my ballot and remember that the who is me and us and we the people. And again, I set to the task that is mine: justice, mercy, humble service in my small corner of the world. I think we are going to need this depth and this simplicity while all the frantic, angry chaos continues to swirl around us. At some level, faith is always about this paradox that we are called to do all that we can imagine for the sake of the highest good we know, and at the same time, to recognize that we are finally not in charge. No matter how clever and strategic, no matter how outraged and urgent, no matter how truthful and ethical and just plain right we are, we still don't run the universe. I don't. You don't. Your race doesn't. Your heritage doesn't. Your language doesn't. Your army doesn't. Your nation doesn't. Your laws don't. Your good intentions, your sacrifices, your most earnest aspirations don't. Nor does your vote. Your vote has its power, much like the example of the way you treat people has power. But it is not dispositive. Would the world be a better place if you did run it? Or if I did? Perhaps. And yet the randomness of evolution and the arbitrary turnings of history have gotten us this far, and they always win in the end. Not only does death come to each of us individually, but systems and empires crumble too. Governments and civilizations fall. Which wouldn't be a problem if we didn't care so much. That's the price we pay for consciousness, for free will, for awareness and hope. That capacity for suffering is our cost, and not just in the present moment. No, the thing that really gets us is that forethought of grief, the things that might happen, the foreseeable consequences of the choices we are making now. It's a kind of a torment in the human condition to be able to imagine what we cannot control, to see calamities on the horizon without being able to stop them, to cherish the good that we know we stand to lose. One alternative, of course, is to turn away, to refuse to see when the vision is too painful. That can be a tempting choice. Another is to grasp for the reins of power by force, to use every means necessary, however dishonest or violent, to seize control and just dictate the outcome that you are certain is right. It rarely works out as planned. But this approach does have the advantage of keeping grief at bay. Indulging in anger and blame is a way to bury unbearable sorrow so that we need not do the emotional work that it entails. One can also retreat into cynicism and moral despair, concluding that since the universe does not seem to honor our values, why bother with them ourselves? Just live out your days in immediate self-concern and little pleasures. Leave the greater good and the larger goals to other people who are willing to stand the heartache. These are the paths of abandoned integrity, of faithlessness. But there is another choice, more difficult, more painful, more real, more holy. My colleague, Reverend Chip Rausch, puts it this way: bombs in the mail, assassination attempts, more white gunmen murdering black strangers in stores, Jews in synagogues, women at yoga, threats against the very lives of our transgender kinfolk and friends, efforts to close our national borders in violation of international law. Yet another week in the struggle for the soul of America. Perhaps you find yourself struggling too. And even so, even with all of that, I know that goodness has survived challenging times before. We have faced oppression and domestic terrorism, and we have changed our nation for the better by persevering, by allowing courageous compassion to lead us. I'm reminded of the words of Booker T. Washington, who said in the gendered language of his time, "I shall allow no man to belittle my soul by making me hate him." So may we be. Particularly in times like these, he continues, it is good to recall and reconnect with the deepest parts of ourselves, our values, our determination, our hunger for justice, our love of mercy, our capacity for change, our stubborn hope, our faith in the bending of the universe. There is change coming. That much is certain. As with most change, there is bound to be significant resistance. We will probably see more violence before the deep change finally breaks through, and yet it will break through. We are awakening from this trance of separation, remembering and re-embodying the full wholeness, wisdom, and transforming love that is our living core. Deeper than DNA, more fundamental than molecules or quarks, always already present in us and to us if we are open to it. We are compassionate courage, roaring forth to save our human cousins from the effects of their own hatred and rescuing the ones we love and all who are vulnerable from those who would do them harm. Every person in sympathy with these ideals is welcome here in this house of reverence, this covenant community of memory and promise. In times like these, and for the rest of our lives, may we be ever more aware of the spirit of life evolving through and within and among us. Change is coming. That much is certain, and some of it will come on Tuesday. We will bring it about, we who show up at the polls, who see to it that others come as well. We who mark the unwieldy ballot that is our prayer flag, our act of faith. Change is coming, as it always does, and some of it will make us excited and happy. Some of it will feel like redemption and revenge and reclaiming our country, no doubt. And some of it, as always, will feel like a blow to the chest and a lead weight in the stomach and a foretaste of fathomless sorrow. Democracy is not a fair weather faith. It confronts us with a world that is not as we would have wished it to be, sometimes in urgent and crucial ways. None of us does not know about cruelty and hunger and disease brought about by inhumane policies. None of us does not know about pain and shame and the discouragement of watching the majority reject our vision of the common good. But even though it can be wrenchingly difficult, even in the aching forethought of grief, we must hold on to tenderness and friendship and the spirit of life and the knowledge that love never ends. These are not complicated things, but they are the antidotes to despair. They are the path of integrity, of change, of the Spirit evolving through and within and among us. What happens on Tuesday will change the world for us in both good and bad ways, in ways both small and large. What we must not allow it to do is to change us, to break our faithfulness to the covenant promises that have made us who we are, covenants of community and a common good, of democracy and equity and power that is accountable to serve our shared well-being. The same honesty that has always mattered will matter still. The same hunger for justice and yearning for mercy and path of humility will still be required of us. The same gentleness with each other, the same simple love of goodness will be just as needed as it has always been. The world will go on, turning in the orbit of change as election days come and go, for that is the nature of things. And the place just right will be found exactly where it has always been, in the open heart, the generous hand, the kinship of our shared humanity, and the assurance that while we are not in charge, we are not alone. Will you stand and sing with me? We extinguish this flame for today, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fires of commitment. For all these we carry in our minds and hearts until we are together again. When we face the darkness of our time openly and together, we tap into deep reserves of strength within us. In times like these, and for the rest of our lives, may we be ever more aware of the spirit of life evolving through and within and among us. So be it.